Okay. There is a really great talk happening right now in track 2 that is all about feature branching considered evil. I would have loved to be in that talk, listening to that talk, just so you know. However, I consider this talk to be the parallel of that talk because this talk is about what do you do with the knowledge that you gained from the other talk, right? So you go to a talk and it's all about the evils of branching. And it's not evil, but it can create problems. And then what? You just go and you say, okay, that's definitely evil. And then you go back to your company and you go right back into that branch that you created a month ago. And you know it might not be the right thing to do, but you still do it. And you might even try to convince other people in your team to try to change the way they work. And they might even say, yeah, sure. And still nothing changes. So this talk is about that stuff. Okay, let's begin. My name is Osherove. This talk is based on a lot of consulting and working in real companies in multiple roles and many, many failures, okay? So this talk is based on the book Elastic Leadership that I wrote. It originally started out with a name called Notes to a Software Team Leader. I find Elastic Leadership to be, I don't know, a bit more official for that kind of framework. But everything I'm going to talk about today is based on real experience, either failures or successes that I've experienced. So we'll talk about what is the role of a leader, what's the point of us trying to lead people, how do we grow teams, what does it mean to be in survival mode, how does that affect our ability to change the structure or the way the teams work or people work. And I want to start exactly with the way I started earlier. It's really, really difficult to say that this talk will have any impact on your life whatsoever. Okay? In fact, you can say that for almost any talk at a conference. This talk will probably not make any difference. It's going to give you great ideas, and hopefully what you'll wish would happen is that you'll come to a company where someone enables those great ideas. But usually people don't come out of a talk and say, I'm going to change something. What I hope is that at the end of this talk, this won't be true, that you'll realize that there are things that you can start changing even today, even if you feel that you don't have the power, maybe a managerial power or the official permission to change things. I'll show that almost anyone can change or start the beginning of a change for things that they believe in. So when I asked at the beginning of this talk, are you a leader? Right? I asked, are you an architect? Are you a team lead? Are you a developer? Are you UX? Are you security? To me, those are all types of leaders. Because when I define a leader, my question becomes, are you a bottleneck in your team? Because if you're a bottleneck in your team, then you're potentially a leader. So what is a bottleneck? A bottleneck is someone who gets to make decisions that other people don't get to make. It is someone that someone waits for to do something or not do something or to approve something. So if you're an architect, usually by definition, you're a bottleneck. If you're a security, by definition, you're a bottleneck. If you're, I'm going to say ops, but not DevOps, but whatever it is with the ops word, you're by definition a bottleneck. Because it means that not only do you have expertise, many times you are the only one with permission to make certain types of decisions. And that makes you, potentially, a leader. Now, I say potentially because you have this great power, and with great power comes great responsibility, as we all know. But many people don't use their powers to do something. I mean, technically, some people, and maybe you've noticed, some people use that power, that bottleneck power, for not evil, but for, let's call it job security, okay? They don't share information, they keep everything to themselves, and those people become very, very powerful at the company. If you've ever had a person in the company that everyone is afraid to talk to, just to not get them angry, because that's the one person that controls the keys to the, let's say, deployment to production or anything like that, that's an example. So it's not specifically used for evil, but a lot of people can use it for good and they don't. Most people are bottlenecks and they just exist. They're neutral. They just make decisions. They don't use it either for bad or for good. They just exist as bottlenecks and decisions flow through them. And basically, the more bottlenecks we have in teams, the slower our teams will be, right? Because decisions have to go to flow. And if we're talking about the idea of self-organizing teams and the idea of what agile teams are supposed to look like and work like, agile teams are supposed to make their own decisions, are supposed to solve their own problems, and by definition, bottlenecks are the opposite of that. So the more bottlenecks you have, the less self-organizing team you have. So that brings us to the next question. What is my role as a leader? If I know that I'm a bottleneck, and I don't have to be an official manager to become a bottleneck, right? We all know that. The one person who knows how the build works, the one person who knows how the database schema is written, the one person who has permission to change something in a specific environment. If I'm in that role, how can I define success for myself? Other than just doing my job. How do I define whether this was a good week or a bad week for me? And when I became a team leader for the first time, I had this question: how do I define what is a good team leader? In the beginning, I thought that being a good team leader means protecting your team. Has anyone been there? Protecting your team, shielding them like Superman from the powers that are above, so the team can work diligently and truthfully. And not only that, sometimes I'll work at night to create code for my team to use in the morning so that they can go ahead and be faster. That was kind of my definition of a good leader back then. But the end result of that was that a couple of years later, my team had basically stayed in the same set of skills and the same set of knowledge that they had when they met me. They stayed in their own comfort zone, and they never learned new things because they weren't really challenged. All they did was they lived in a bubble, they were fed through a tube, and they did their work as much as they could, and whenever they have a big problem, they would just go to, in this case, Daddy, and say, I have a problem, fix it for me. And I would be, Dad, let me solve it for you. And that's kind of, today I look at that as a wrong definition of leadership. Today I think that's not success. I think that is the easiest form of leadership that there could be, and it definitely works in some situations, but not in all situations. So my role as a leader today is different. My role as a leader today is to make myself unneeded. I measure my success by how much people need me. So how do you measure that? How many questions do I get per day on something that only I can solve, on something that only I know? And again, I don't have to be a tech lead for that. If I'm an architect, it could be, how many questions about architecture or architecture-related decisions have to be handled by me and are coming into my conscious stream? I can literally measure how many people come into my room, how many people send me an email, how many things I have to kind of take care of for other people. And that could be the beginning of a metric. And metrics are good because numbers can give us trends over time. And what I'd like to see is that the trend goes down. The less people need me, the more I can teach them how to solve their own problems in my field of expertise, the less they need me, which means I'm basically empowering them. And as Kevlin said in the keynote today, being a 10x developer is enabling 10 other people around you. I think that is a perfect definition of what bottlenecks can do. Because by being a bottleneck, you're by definition encouraging people to assemble around you. But it also gives you the great power to enable many people at the same time by teaching them skills. Because they will naturally come to you when they're stuck. And that is the natural opportunity to teach. So if I want to measure my success is how much do people need me? How much of a bottleneck am I? Another word for it is buzz factor. People have heard me say the word buzz factor. Raise your hand if you've heard this word, this term before. For the people who didn't, a bus factor can be defined as how many people have to get hit by a bus for the team to stop working, okay? And in some teams, that's one. There's one person, if that person doesn't make it tomorrow, the team just cannot work. And I used to work at a company like that, consult for a company, where there was one person who was in charge of the entire build and deployment process, a big insurance company. And every month, they would deploy a new version. And one day, this person, he was not a manager, he was basically one of the architects in this group. He was an outside consultant working for probably 6 or 7 years at the same company. And one day he decided, you know what? I think I'm going to switch companies. It's time. I want to learn new things. And for 3 months, the company could not deliver code to production because this person had their entire build process in their head. It was their job. They were the ones that would do it. And deployment would take several days. This process of running this and running that and a bunch of scripts and making sure database schemas were updated and verifying a lot of things, but it was all in their head, and maybe a few scripts that they saved was not even in source control, and even if it was, nobody knew that there was source control that he was using. So the company had, at great expense, I might add, to bring that person back, pay them triple for a month, and sit there with recording his screen and putting a microphone on him as he was deploying the software so that they could grab that knowledge out of that person. So how much does a bus factor cost? It could cost everything. Bus factors are huge risks. So if you're a bottleneck, not only that might not be job security, it might actually be a huge risk to the company. And if I'm a company, and if I'm a manager and I have people that are specifically bottlenecks and they refuse to let go of their knowledge and share it, that's a huge risk, and I will seek to replace those people as soon as possible with people that have the same knowledge or close to it, but are willing to share information. So there's risk inherent in the idea of being a bottleneck. But you might think about the opposite risk. If nobody needs me, if nobody is coming to me for questions, and I'm just sitting in my office all day, does the company really need me? Right? Do people actually need me if they can get rid of me? If I grow the team around me to solve their problems without me, and the team doesn't need me, is that actually good for me? And that, I think, is a quite scary thought. And here's the answer that I see. I've never seen a situation where a person was so good at enabling the teams around them that the company let them go. Okay? The company never came to a person and said, well, looks like they're doing okay now. Thank you. What happens usually is the company says, well, I noticed that when I put this person with that team begins to work much better than they used to. That team produces maybe higher quality, maybe they work in maybe they deliver sooner but not faster, right? Maybe they can work on features on various ranges instead of just on front end or back end or a specific component. I like that person. What if I put him now on this team that has had the same problems in my company, so then that person can grow that team? So what happens is that you become much more important to the company because your influence factor increases. Instead of just influencing a single team with your expertise, each person on that team becomes a better expert at what you know how to think of, at your expertise. So imagine that if I'm an architect and I slowly create a team that knows how to think like architects, those people will then go on to other projects and other teams, and they will use their knowledge in those teams as well. So my influence is actually much bigger. My influence factor has increased substantially. So maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe it's also not a bad thing that not only do we remove the risk, maybe we also have time for ourselves to do things we've always wanted to do, but we never have time because we always fix the same problems for everybody else. And when I was a team lead, I remember multiple times where I just spent hours and hours solving the same problems, small issues that people should have been able to solve themselves. But because they were so busy and we didn't have enough time, I would solve all of it myself, and I would work on things that would pretty much be boring. There wouldn't be enough time for me to learn new skills. And I wanted to learn new skills. I wanted to advance. I wanted to get better at my own job. But I couldn't because I was too much in the trenches. I wanted to get into other trenches. That's what I'm trying to say. So if I could get the team around me to start solving their own issues, how do I do that? I can say, if someone comes to me with a problem, one thing I can tell them is, instead of me solving it for you, let's solve it together, right? I'll sit with you while you code on that problem, and I'll sit with you and we'll do pairing on it together so that you can actually learn through your fingers how to solve this issue. And maybe next time you won't even need me when you come across this sort of problem. If someone comes to me with a specific lack of permission, I might give them permission to make some type of decision, and I can coach them on how to make that decision. So instead of me doing it at the beginning, I could challenge people to do it themselves, or I can enable them to do it themselves. And I'm talking very loosely here in specific points in time. It's not that from this point on, I have like 10 people in my team, and whoever comes to me, I'm going to say, you do it. Okay? And then the second time is like, you do it. And the third person, you do it. Because at some point, no one will approach me anymore, right? Hey, Roy, what's the time? Check your watch. I don't care. At some point, people will stop trusting me. So what I want to do is that for each person, I will choose a specific skill that I think that they need to master, that they're missing. And for anything else, I will still solve their problems. But for that specific thing, I will coach them so they won't have to solve their problems with me, so they can solve it alone. And for each person, I can choose one skill that I think they're missing from my own expertise, and that is the thing that I can focus on. And that way, people still trust the fact that I'm trying to coach them, but I'm still helping them actually deal with the real world instead of just learning new skills. And you might be thinking at this point, okay, so you want me to start coaching and asking people to solve problems that only I can solve at this point. I mean, I like the idea, Roy, but, there's a couple of people, in my team, I'm not sure that's going to work on. Like, there's this one person, if I ask that person to work on something that only I know, like on architecture, I don't think that person is going to get it. Or there's a few people in my team that are just, there's something, I don't know, I don't think this is the right team to try it on. That's what I'm saying, right? But maybe on the next team that I'll have, that I'll be part of, I'm definitely going to try it. And of course, you're never going to get the perfect team. No one ever gets the perfect team. That doesn't exist. Perfect teams don't exist because humans are so different. Everyone comes from different backgrounds. Everyone comes from different sets of knowledge and experience. And so you will basically have so much diversity in terms of knowledge and experience. I'm not talking about diversity in terms of race, but I'm talking about diversity in terms of experience. That you will never get a team of people who think the way you wish they thought. So maybe the role of a leader is not just to make themselves unnecessary, it is to grow the team into the team I wish I had. If great teams are grown, they're never hired. You will get a bunch of people, and they're random people. You don't usually control who you get. If you're lucky, you can control a few of who you get. But you will never get the perfect amount, the perfect set of people that are just right for challenging and trying new things. Instead, what's going to happen, you're going to get a bunch of people They're all different than you in some way. They're all different from each other. Some of them, sometimes they don't even agree with each other. Sometimes they have very little experience. Sometimes they come with so much experience that they're kind of trying to take over the entire team. There's so many different variations. And now you have to take this group of people, whether you have permission as a manager or whether you're just an expert in the team, and kind of transform them into the team you wish you were working with. And I think, to me, that is the true purpose of leadership, is to grow a team that we wish we could work with. And this is a process that takes years. This is not a process that takes weeks, not even months. This is a process that will never end, because you will never have a lifetime of work with people unless you work at the same company for 20 years. But what we can do is we can realize, we can recognize that leadership is the struggle to create the team we wish we had through many, many small experiences and challenges over a long period of time. And if that is my moral compass, if that's how I kind of try to accomplish that, then I also have a way to make decisions whenever I have a dilemma. If I have a dilemma which person to give a specific task to, I can use this moral compass to decide which person is going to learn the most from this task versus which person is going to do the task in the fastest way. Now, the dilemma might also be a bit more challenging than this, but imagine that I did grow the perfect team. What would it look like? And in my head, the perfect team is a team of team leaders. If you've ever seen a team of team leads, you can imagine how they work, how they operate. A team of team leads that work together usually will be completely self-organizing, because whenever they approach a problem, they know how to approach the problem correctly. It doesn't mean they know how to solve it, but a team of team leaders is a team of people who have faced a situation where they have a problem and they don't know what to do. Now, here's, to me, like a very small but noticeable difference. Usually when I try to coach people and people come up to me, it's when they come up to a task and they're stuck and they don't know what to do. They come to me. And then what do I do if I don't know what to do? Because many times I won't know what the right answer is. We will never have all the answers to all the problems. The difference to me between a team of team leads and a team of people who still have to learn that type of thinking is that a team of team leads will know what to do when they don't know what to do. That's kind of the difference. If I know what to do when I don't know what to do, and the person coming to me has no idea what to do when they don't know what to do, what is my job? My job is not to give them a solution, because then they will not learn anything. My job is to transfer the skill of knowing what to do when you don't know what to do to that person. Okay? The way that I think about the problem is what I want them to learn. I want them to think about the problem like I think about the problem. So, for example, when I do the workshops, and tomorrow I think we have like a full day workshop on this. When I do the workshop, one of the things that I challenge leaders to do is, if someone comes to them with a problem, is to never, ever give a solution, or not even to ask a leading question. Because just by asking a leading question, let's say someone says, Roy, we need faster build machines. I came to you because I don't know what to do about that, right? Now, maybe as a leader, I don't have budgets or permissions to do that either, but I know what to do when I don't know what to do about that, right? So what I want to ask them is questions like, okay, what are you going to do? It's a really weird question. It's a big challenge. Usually people, when you ask them that weird question, they already know the answer. They already know what they would have done if they had to solve everything themselves. They already have the notion of what to do, but they don't feel they have permission to ask it to themselves. So people, even if they know the question is coming, and I still ask, what are you going to do? They might still be, there's this gasp of, what am I going to do? Because what I'm trying to teach them is, what if I wasn't here? What if you were the leader? What would you do in that situation? Because when they get to the point where they say, oh, you know what, I actually have a couple of ideas what I could do in this situation, that's the beginning of the realization that you can actually solve your own problems. Because if I have a team of people that when they're faced with a problem, they look inward about what they could do about it instead of asking me, then that is the beginning of a self-organizing team. A self-organizing team isn't a team that just knows how to build software. It is a team that knows how to solve problems that they've never faced before. That is, to me, the true self-organization. Because usually when people come to the edges of their knowledge and they're stuck, they either feel they don't have permission or they don't know what to do about a specific situation. The people after that edge are the people that know what to do, or they know how to handle unknown situations. And we've all faced unknown situations, and we will always face unknown situations because every software project is different. And this is really tough. I mean, can you imagine yourself as a leader? People coming to you, and instead of really, and you know what the solution might be, is to teach them to think how to come up with the solution on their own. That's really difficult. It's very challenging. And I think Jerry Weinberg put it best in a book that he wrote calling Managing Teams Congruently. By the way, congruently is a word I had to look up. Congruently means in flow, in the same vein as it kind of everything fits together. And I'm paraphrasing. He says, leadership done right is a tough job. That's why leaders get paid more. But a lot of leaders like to take the money and not do all the difficult parts. What is the difficult part about leadership? What are the difficult parts? Can anyone tell me? To delegate. Anything else? Responsibility. Like, it's my responsibility. That's the easy part, to take responsibility. It's my responsibility. I'm going to work until 3 a.m. because it's my responsibility. That's the easy part. Anything else? Sorry? Motivate the team. Anything else? Sorry? You were saying something? Coach. Those things that you're saying, they're people related. People are the most difficult thing about leadership. If we could get rid of people in teams, leadership would be so easy. Yeah, I know. It's really, really sad. We really understand machines, but we don't understand people. Not even that, it scares the hell out of us to work with people. That's why a lot of leaders hide in their room and send emails. That's why a lot of leaders are always busy in so many meetings and you can never get them. Because deep down, and this is not a conscious thought, you know that when you have time to work with your team, you're going to have a lot of one-on-one meetings where you're going to have tough conversations. And tough conversations are by definition tough. What do you do with that one person who's always negative in the team? Do you want to have that tough conversation? What about that one person who always smells so bad nobody wants to work with them? I'm sorry, that happened. What about the one person who is missing a really important set of skills, but you and that person grew up together and you became a team lead and now you're leading that person? Are you actually going to talk to him about something that he's missing or doing wrong? That's a really tough conversation. What's a really easy way to solve it? Not talk to people. That's doing all the easy parts and taking the money. But how do you actually challenge people to grow and learn new skills? If I wanted to get people to learn new skills, what can I do? Well, another book by Jerry Weinberg talked about how people learn things, becoming a technical leader. But two books that I highly, highly recommend. A few good years ago, I read this book, and I really like this chart. This is the chart of Jerry pinpointing scores on a pinball machine, right? Over time, he was getting better. You know what a pinball machine is, right? You have the ball, and you have the two flipper, whatever. And he was saying, oh, over time, I was getting better. So given time, you will get better at something. But when he was plotting the same chart with higher resolution, you could see that there were periods of slow growth and periods of fast growth. And I was wondering, what the hell happened in those periods? Why are there times where I'm learning something and I'm getting much better faster, and there are times where I'm learning about something, but it's a much slower learning curve? And he realized that those faster curves are happening whenever he learned something new about playing the game. Like when he learned how to play the game differently. For example, if you get more than a single ball at the game at the same time, right? If you have 2 or even 3, you get double points or triple points for every hit. So you can maximize your points much faster, you can become better, but your strategy has to change. Instead of trying to get the ball in a specific way, you want to try to get to a different way, and now you have to learn how to manage more than one ball in the game. That's a completely different strategy than working from before. So it's a paradigm shift. Okay? But whenever he learned a new paradigm, at the beginning he was actually worse. He was worse because he had to practice the new way of working. So whenever he became better, he became worse before he became better. This is basically unlearning the previous way so that I can learn the new way. Now, when I looked at this chart, it reminded me of so many things in my life that I had to go through to where I became worse before I became better. I mean, the obvious thing to say is programming languages. I started in Visual Basic. Don't say anything, I still love that language. I wish it were open source. But then I moved to C#, and I programmed in Java, and Python, and Ruby, and a little bit of C++, but I'm really not proud of that. But every time I learned a new language, I remember the first hello world that actually had to happen, right? Just learning the new syntax. That was a horrible experience. Remember the first hello world, and then the second one in a different language? Everything is different. The ID is different, the buttons are different, the semicolons look different. Hundreds of compiler errors. Oh, I'm missing references. What is the system? And there's like a first day or two where you just feel like an idiot, okay? But after that, you feel much better. But then he said in the book, this applies not only to learning tech skills, it applies to life skills. Whenever you learn a new skill in life, you will be worse before you become better. And I immediately thought about my own life experience of having children. Because I have 3 kids. And this really mimics my 3 kids and my behavior with my wife when they were born. Because this is us. Let's see if this works. Is this working? It's working the other way. There you go. Okay. This is me and my wife with no kids. Everything is perfect. Working full-time, always complaining we don't have enough time. And then here, that's our first kid, right here, okay? Well, actually, it was here, that's the beginning of the deterioration, and then the first few weeks just go downhill. For the first few months of our first child being born, life was worse. I'm saying worse. I mean, I love my kids, but life was difficult, okay? Really, really difficult. We had to learn new skills of survival. We were so tired just learning how kids sleep. Well, they don't. And just learning how kids eat. They always do. Just learning when they cry and why, because they're burping, they always do. Just learning, just dealing with that. And being able to somehow work and sleep and eat ourselves, that was a horrible, horrible couple of months, just learning. We were basically in survival mode. People had to bring food to our house because we didn't have enough energy to bring food. We would kind of beg for people to, hey, can you bring some food over when you're here? And then learn how to sleep when the baby sleeps. You know that, right? And then one person goes out for groceries and the other person, it's like military. But then after a few months, things become better. After a few months, we were kind of here. We're like, okay, this is actually getting better. It's getting easier. We've learned a few skills. And now we're handling everything we did before, but we also have a third person in the house. Third person, which we will never get rid of. A third person that is now a part of our lives. We were different people from the second point to the first point. We had better skills. And we looked back at the time before kids and we didn't realize, how did we ever say we don't have enough time to do things? Because now we're doing the same things with a baby. And of course, a couple of years later, Second child was born, and immediately life became much more difficult. And I say much more, I mean much, much more. Because I thought, well, it's just another kid. We already know how to handle kids. But 2 kids is a completely different situation than 1 child. Because 2 kids, first of all, now it's a local defense, right? It's like, first it was like 2 parents, 1 child. Now it's 1 child for each parent. They wake each other up at night. There's chain reaction going on. There is teaming up going on. One gets sick, the other gets sick. You can't just go out for groceries and leave me at the house with 2 kids. What, are you crazy? No, you have to take 1 child with you. Now, I want to say that shopping for groceries with a child is a completely different experience than just alone. The amount of skill that you have to handle just to handle that one person going and not killing themselves constantly is just amazing. And of course, crying and all that. And yeah, there's so many things. But after a couple of months, well, I'm going to say a year, things became better, became easier. And so by the 3rd point, we were again different people. And we couldn't even believe that we had a problem with 1 child. Because if you leave me with 1 child, it's so easy. I can handle 1 child. But 2 kids, now that's kind of it's still a bit difficult. And then our 3rd child was born. And I realized that everything I knew about life was completely wrong. Because 3 kids, they outnumber you. They outnumber you, but your skills from the first 2 kids also help. Because when you have 1 kid and they get hurt, you're like, oh, my sweet baby, are you okay? Let me handle everything for you and cuddle you. But when you have 3 kids and the smallest one gets hurt, you basically go to the oldest one and you say, handle that. They take care of themselves. They're a self-organizing team by this point. It was the most amazing experience. They help each other. They work with each other. It wasn't difficult as much as it was illuminating the fact that we have grown our own little self-organizing team, and they're learning skills not just about the world they live in, but about their own brothers and how to take care of their own team members. So now as parents, I get to decide whether whenever someone needs something, can I teach this new skill to one of their brothers? For example, getting a glass of milk. For example, warming up your own food in the fridge. I can do that for you, but what if I teach you to do that on your own, right? And if you're too small, what if I teach you to ask for your older brother? Suddenly, our life is freeing up, so we have more time to do things that we're more interested in. That doesn't sound right, but things that we're more having fun with, like we can go out and we can actually take care of each other. So this learning, this kind of downturn before we learn something new is part of life. And if it's part of life, if it always happens before we truly get better at something, then instead of it happening to us, we can plan it. That was my realization. If I want people to learn new skills, to learn paradigm shifts in how they work, because what is it when I ask someone to solve their own problems? I'm asking them for a paradigm shift. I'm asking them to think differently. I'm asking them to think about what to do when you don't know what to do. No one has ever asked me that before that happened at work. It might be very annoying. It might be very, very frustrating for a person to get asked to solve a problem that I usually solved for them. I remember the first time I asked my manager to solve a problem for me, and he said, I want you to do it. And I was really, really annoyed because in my head it was like, but that's your problem. The fact that I cannot code right now, or the fact that this is not happening for some reason, that's on you to solve. And my manager calmly said, if I solve it for you, you will never learn how to solve it yourself. And I'd love to tell you that solved all of my annoyance, but it did not. I was annoyed and I was frustrated and I did what I had to do, but I was grumbling. I was like, this sucks. This isn't in my job description. This isn't what I was signed up to do. I work on mobile and you're asking me to work on back end. I'm working on this and you're asking me to work on... That's not my job description. You're asking me to teach people. I was annoyed. I was frustrated. Kind of felt like this. So if we think about it, the annoyance and the frustration and the difficulty, that's part of the learning curve. So I can plan this learning curve for the people in my team, and I can expect them to feel annoyed and frustrated. And I can expect them to come out on the other side better, but I know that there's going to be a period where people might not necessarily be happy. What I'm trying to say is that happiness is not it doesn't mean that you're actually doing your job. What I look for usually in teams that are learning is I look for people being uncomfortable. Because when they're uncomfortable, it means they're learning a new skill. It means that they've done something that they've never done before. And when I say uncomfortable, I don't just mean learning a new framework. I mean working differently in a way that has consequences. Something that feels weird or even wrong in a way. That feels like this could have a real effect on my life if I keep doing it and I do it badly. Something that feels a bit scary. It has to feel a bit scary. Otherwise, we're not truly pushing ourselves to learn new skills. This is, by the way, what it really looks like. This is the true diagram. So you can see that every day has ups and downs, or every month, but the real downs are much bigger than the regular ones. So learning a new framework, that's right here. Okay? Learning Vim, that's right here. Okay? This is Vim. If you don't know Vim, I'm happy for you. I love it, but there's definitely a learning curve for it. So if I can do that and I can plan it for myself, I can also decide that if I want to learn a new skill, I have to put myself in a very uncomfortable situation. And that uncomfortable situation has to do with something that feels scary. So at some point, I quit my job as a CTO in a company, and I went to work as an intern at a Ruby shop. For 6 months, I went and I worked as an intern at that Ruby shop. I never worked with MacBook Airs, but I got one. I never worked with Vim, and I had to work with Vim. I never worked with Ruby before, and I had to work with Ruby. I never worked with Git before correctly, and I had to work in Git and do smaller commits. A bunch of different things happened. So for those 6 months, it felt terrible. But it also felt amazing because I did it on purpose. I chose to jump into a ravine so I can climb out on the other side. And the things that I learned from doing that were things that I would never have learned by just doing it on the side in the evening after regular day hours. Because what I learned are things about culture, about working, about lightweight tooling, about different ideas of how to work differently. Not just a new framework or a new language. That's the easy part. And we really have to put that on ourselves to jump into ravines and try to solve things in a way that makes us feel uncomfortable. So we can say that growing the team could be our ravine, our thing that scares us. If I ask every leader to do one thing after this talk, is to do something that scares the hell out of you. Something that scares the hell out of you could be asking the team to start solving their own problems while you're not solving the problems for them. Can you imagine doing that? I mean, can you imagine the idea of having to tell someone, no, but let's do it together? Some people might like it. Some people might really not like it. That's scary, and that's scary because it's about people. This would take time. We would have to choose whether we can actually do it tomorrow. We have to choose whether our team has the time to invest in learning new skills. Time is the one factor that we feel we cannot control. And this is where the model of elastic leadership comes in. Because if I ask you to do that and challenge people tomorrow, you're going to say, okay, Roy, but we don't have time for that stuff. We're too busy fixing fires. We're too busy doing things that are already late. We don't have time to start challenging people to do that. I mean, I like the idea. And this is what I would call survival mode. And in survival mode, which I think probably 85–90% of the teams that I see are in, we don't have time to learn new skills. We don't have time to slowly practice. And in survival mode, there really is no reason for you to challenge teams because it will fail. You don't have time to slowly practice a new skill. If I ask you to work with Vim and we are on a time schedule, time pressure, and it takes you 2 hours to close Vim, we've already lost. What we want the team to be in learning mode. And learning mode is where you actually have time to learn new skills. The switch between survival mode and learning mode requires something really, really scary. It requires us to talk to management and explain that we are in survival mode and that it is a spiral that will only get worse and worse and worse if we don't do something about it. Technical debt, like we saw at the keynote, is definitely part of that spiral. We have to re-estimate. We have to remove commitments so that we have time to work on our current commitments in a slower fashion. Once we have re-estimation, then we are able to move into learning mode. This sounds really, really scary, right? Can you go to your manager and say, this doesn't work, we have to re-estimate, everything is going to take longer in a month, but we're going to learn new skills. And if it sounds scary to you to do that, I'm really happy, because scary is good. Remember, if it scares you to do something, maybe that's the right thing to do. Maybe if you get out of the comfort zone and actually try to push the team into learning mode, there's so much you can learn from it yourselves. And truly, in learning mode, we keep teaching skills to the team until they don't need us. At that point, the team could be considered self-organizing. But most teams are in survival mode, and we treat them as if they're self-organizing. We treat a team of people just running around like headless chickens, and we say, you are self-organizing. I will close the door, and I will meet you in 14 days, and you will give me something. And I open the door after 14 days, and there's a bunch of bodies laying around. They're all dead. They don't know how to take care of themselves in those situations because they don't have permission. They don't know what to do when they don't know what to do, but somehow we're treating them as if they do. And the other way around is sometimes you'll have a self-organizing team. These people know what they do. They've been doing it for a long time. They work together, but we treat them as if they're in survival mode. What are you going to do today? What did you do yesterday? Anything stopping you? You're kind of treating it like a military exercise. Those people will leave because you're treating them as if they don't know what they're doing, and we're kind of dumbing down everything for them, and we're chewing up their food. So treating teams in the wrong status could definitely lead to a degradation and people leaving, basically. If we don't realize in which mode we're in, we will not be able to get out of that mode and move into self-organization. So there's a manifesto that I wrote this, and it keeps changing. We believe that to make teams better, we need to actually adapt our own leadership style based on the current situation. Because in survival mode, I might have to be a different type of leader. Maybe not coaching, but definitely more of a captain that turns the ship around. But if I try to be that captain with a sinking ship, but the team is learning, the team will never learn anything. So the word in survival mode is, if the ship is sinking, the captain doesn't call a meeting. The captain gives orders because we want to get out of survival mode. But in learning mode, you definitely want to be much more of a coach and enable people to make mistakes. That's why the re-estimation happens there. And self-organization is where our leadership style reduces the most into more of an enabling factor, not telling people what to do, but making sure they get the goals achieved. People already know how to achieve the goals. We're just kind of watching over. Teams can move between these different processes, different ways of work, because reality keeps changing around them. We have to constantly watch out. So our leadership type is adaptive based on what those people are experiencing at this point in time. We want to participate in human interaction. We understand people just as much as we do machines. We have to learn more people skills, not just how to be nice or how to give feedback, how to have tough conversations, how to approach things in a way, even if it scares us, how to jump over that hump. I think if we learn how to jump over that hump, we're going to be in a much better position. So how much time do we have left? 2 minutes, okay. So in 2 minutes, I want to talk about a few things you can take with you today. If you're not a manager, how can you get out of your comfort zone today? What is your ravine? So here are a couple of examples. Next time someone comes to you and asks you to solve a problem for them, say this: let's solve this problem together. But make sure that you either don't write the code, you don't write the stuff on the whiteboard, you ask questions that will lead the person to think the way that you think about the problem. This is a difficult part. This is a difficult part because we tend to already solve the problem in our heads and already ask a leading question towards that solution. But it's asking the right question that is the thinking process. And we want them to ask that question. So we have to kind of be a mirror and almost not interfere, and sometimes just guide towards things that we've experienced before, etc. Have a meeting that scares you. You have a meeting, there's this one person you've always wanted to talk to about something that bothers you, have it. Do that meeting. Scares you? I'm really happy for you. You're going to learn something from that meeting. You're going to learn what happens when you actually do those things. You might find out the devil is not so bad. A couple of more suggestions. Work on something in a different way that scares you. Right? Work in a different paradigm, work in a different team, switch to a different role, do something that scares the hell out of you. Something that's not maybe in your job description even, but you've always wanted to do maybe, but you've never had the chance or never had the courage to ask. If you're managers, try getting the team out of survival mode. I promise it's going to scare you. But it's going to be a great learning experience. You're going to have to do it anyway at some point. And I truly believe this is part of what we're supposed to do. Challenge team members to do something that scares them. That's going to scare you. It scares me to ask someone to do something that scares them if I've never done it before. But we should be able to accept the fact that people are going to be annoyed and maybe sometimes frustrated, but that it's a temporary thing. We don't have to make sure everyone loves us. Okay, that's why my moral compass is, do they need me or not? And that is how I measure my effectiveness. And it scares me to realize that some people might not love the fact that I'm challenging them. And that's okay. It's okay. Change team structures, roles, and processes. That's scary too, because you might have to answer to management about why you did all those things. But we have to learn to experiment with our teams anyway, to experiment in different ways of working. And the fact that it's difficult for management will give us a chance to dive into a ravine to explain why this experiment might be useful. So the point of it is, if you end up with something that scares you to do, try to do it. I think that will be the biggest factor on the way to start changing real things. Because that will enable you to challenge other people to do something different, because you've already been in that path. You know what they're going to feel like when you ask them to do it. And until you've actually done it yourself, you cannot ask other people to do it because it's going to feel insincere. It feels like you're cheating. So you have to go through it yourself so you know that it's crappy on the inside, but it's great on the other side. You have to have that feeling, because when you explain it, it's much more tendency to actually try things when you've actually experienced those things. We can change things much more than we realize. We have the ability, but we have to do things that scare us on the way to achieve that. If you want to learn more, the book Elastic Leadership, there's a workshop tomorrow, and you can read my blog at 5wise.com. Find me on Twitter. We don't have Slack time, but I promise to look at Slack later and answer all the questions, and I'll also remain here during lunch if anyone wants to ask me any other questions. And with that, may your life be scary a little bit, but learn to enjoy it. Thank you very much and good luck.